The Boeing 737 shuddered through turbulence at 37,000 feet, and nobody in economy class thought anything of it. Cup holders rattled. Overhead bins creaked. A baby cried 3 rows back. The man in 8C didn't look up from his daughter's coloring book, where she was meticulously filling in a cartoon dolphin with purple crayon. He had the kind of face you'd forget in an airport terminal, sandy hair going gray at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses, a faded Notre Dame sweatshirt with a coffee stain on the sleeve. His daughter, maybe 6 years old, wore light-up sneakers and had a gap-toothed smile. They looked like 1,000 other families flying home for Thanksgiving. The flight attendant had already passed by twice, offering extra pretzels with the kind of gentle smile reserved for single parents traveling alone with small children. Nobody knew, nobody could have known, not until the pilot's voice cracked over the intercom with words that made every passenger's blood freeze. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation. 2 military aircraft are approaching our position. We've been instructed to follow their guidance. Please remain calm." Through the scratched window of 8C, passengers on the port side could see it, a dark silhouette against the cloud layer closing fast. Then another. F-35 Lightning IIs, their angular stealth profiles unmistakable even to civilian eyes. They flanked the airliner like sharks circling prey, their presence both magnificent and terrifying. The cabin erupted in whispers. Phones came out despite regulations. A businessman in 7D started crying. But the man in 8C just kept coloring with his daughter, his hand steady on the crayon, though something had changed in his posture. Something coiled and ready. The lead F-35 pulled closer, near enough that passengers could see markings on its fuselage. The pilot inside would be scanning the airliner's windows through advanced optics, looking for something, or someone. A flight attendant rushed toward the cockpit, her professional composure cracking. The intercom clicked on again, but this time it wasn't the captain's voice. It was radio spillover, a fragment of military transmission that shouldn't have bled through. "Actual, we have visual on the target aircraft." Requesting confirmation on static, then silence. The man in 8C finally looked up from the coloring book. His daughter tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, why are those planes so close?" He kissed the top of her head, his jaw tight. "Just checking on us, sweetheart, making sure we get home safe." But his eyes tracked the F-35's movements with the precision of someone who knew exactly what those pilots were seeing, exactly what their instruments were telling them, and exactly why they'd been scrambled at combat speed to intercept a civilian flight over the Midwest. The question burning through 37,000 feet of cold November air wasn't what was happening. It was who this man really was, and why the most advanced fighter jets in the American arsenal had just dropped everything to find him. The F-35 on the port side adjusted its position, and through the narrow window the distinctive tail flash became visible, a lightning bolt over crossed swords, the insignia of the 421st Fighter Squadron out of Hill Air Force Base. These weren't training aircraft on a routine intercept. These were operational jets, armed and active, their pilots among the elite tier of naval and Air Force aviators. Inside the lead aircraft, callsign Raptor 1, Major Kendra Okoye's gloved hand rested on the throttle as her helmet-mounted display overlaid targeting data across her field of vision. She'd been in the middle of a refueling rotation when the scramble order came through, Priority Alpha, no explanation. Just coordinates, altitude, and a single directive: locate and maintain visual on United 2487. No weapons free. No intercept protocol. Just find it and watch. "Raptor 1 to actual, I have the bird," she transmitted, her voice flat and professional despite the strangeness of the tasking. "Boeing 737-800, maintaining course 270, speed consistent with civilian traffic. No deviations. Please advise on posture." The response came through encrypted channel, audio only, the voice belonging to someone so far up the chain of command that Okoye's eyebrows rose behind her visor. "Raptor 1, maintain current separation. Do not repeat, do not attempt communication with the civilian aircraft. We need confirmation of a passenger, transmitting photo reference now." Her tactical display flickered and a photograph materialized. Military ID photo, the kind taken in harsh fluorescent light against a gray backdrop. But the face stopped her cold, not because she recognized it, though something about the eyes seemed familiar in a way that nagged at her memory, but because of the information beneath it. The rank. The commendations. The list of operations that ran longer than any combat pilot she'd ever seen. And at the bottom, in red text, inactive civilian status, approach with extreme caution. Her wingman, Raptor 2, came over the tactical channel. Lead, are you seeing this personnel file? This can't be right. These missions, some of these are still classified above our clearance. Akoi's jaw tightened. She'd been flying combat missions since she was 23, had logged carrier landings in weather that would ground most pilots, had put ordnance on target in 3 different theaters. She didn't rattle easily, but something about this felt wrong in a way that made her gut twist. Raptor 2, maintain radio discipline, she said quietly. We follow orders. Somebody wants this person found, we find them. Through her canopy, she could see faces pressed against the airliner's windows, phones recording, panic rippling through the cabin. She hated this part, scaring civilians who had no idea they were caught in something bigger than a delayed flight. But orders were orders. She adjusted her position, bringing the lightning eye close enough that her presence was unmistakable, and began scanning the windows methodically. Row by row, face by face. Inside the 737, the man in 8C had gone very still. His daughter had abandoned her coloring book and was pressed against the window, watching the fighter jet with wide-eyed wonder instead of fear. Children saw things differently. To her, this was exciting, a story for show and tell. The businessman in 7D had started hyperventilating into a paper bag. 2 rows back, a woman was praying in Spanish, her rosary beads clicking rapidly. The flight attendants had stopped pretending everything was normal and were huddled near the galley, whispering frantically. The man's phone buzzed in his pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he did something strange. He pressed his palm flat against the window just for a moment, fingers splayed against the cold acrylic. Outside, impossibly, the F-35 pilot seemed to adjust course slightly, as if acknowledging the gesture. The radio spillover crackled again, clearer this time. Actual, I have confirmation. Row 8, window seat. Male passenger matching the profile. He's not trying to hide. He knows we're here. A pause, then a different voice, older, waited with something that sounded almost like reverence. Copy that, Raptor 1. Does he have the child with him? Affirmative. Young female, approximately 6 years old. Jesus Christ. The transmission cut off abruptly, as if someone had physically grabbed the microphone away. The man in 8C leaned down to his daughter's ear. Maggie, I need you to be very brave for a few minutes, okay? Can you do that for Daddy? She nodded solemnly, sensing the shift in his tone. Are we in trouble? He smiled, and it was genuine despite everything. No, baby, we're not in trouble, but some old friends of mine want to talk, and it might seem scary. I need you to remember that everyone here is trying to keep everyone safe. Can you remember that? Like your stories, the ones about when you were a pilot. His hand froze halfway to her hair. He told her sanitized versions, bedtime tales about flying fast jets and watching sunrises from impossible altitudes. He'd never mentioned the operations, the missions that didn't exist in any official record, the targets that disappeared in the night with no CNN coverage. Yes, he said quietly. Like my stories. The lead F-35 pulled ahead of the airliner now, positioning itself directly in the 737's flight path, a clear signal that couldn't be misunderstood. The civilian aircraft was being directed, gently but unmistakably, away from its filed flight plan. The pilot's voice came back over the intercom, steadier now but still tight with tension. Folks, we've been instructed to make an unscheduled landing. We'll be on the ground in approximately 12 minutes. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened, and he didn't finish. The man in 8C could see what was coming before anyone else. The second pair of F-35s appeared from below the cloud deck, rising like predators from deep water. 4 fighters now, a full element. This wasn't an intercept anymore. This was an escort. the kind reserved for Air Force One or aircraft carrying nuclear materials, the kind that meant someone very important or very dangerous was aboard. Major Okoye watched her tactical display as the new arrivals, call signs Falcon 3 and Falcon 4, assumed positions at the 737 6 o'clock. Perfect formation, textbook execution. But her mind was still churning through the personnel file she'd seen, trying to match the middle-aged man in the window with the legend printed in dry military prose. 16 years of active service, multiple decorations for valor, 3 different special operations units, and a call sign that had been whispered about in ready rooms across the fleet, the kind of name that came up in late-night hangar conversations when the old heads talked about missions that never happened. Falcon 0, the ghost pilot, the one who'd supposedly flown deep penetration strikes into airspace so hostile that even satellites couldn't track him, the one who'd brought assets out of countries that officially we'd never been in, the one who disappeared from service 7 years ago with no explanation, no farewell tour, just an empty locker and a redacted service record. Okoye keyed her mic. Actual requesting clarification. Is Falcon 0 the target passenger? Silence stretched for 5 seconds. 10. Then, Raptor 1, you will not use that call sign on this channel. Do you understand? Her blood went cold. That wasn't protocol speaking. That was fear. Understood. Actual apologies. The new voice came through, the older one from before, and this time she recognized it. Admiral Hutchins, PACOM commander, a man who didn't personally oversee routine intercepts. Major Okoye, listen carefully. The passenger you're escorting stopped flying 7 years ago to raise his daughter after his wife died. He's been living quietly in Cincinnati, working as an air traffic controller, coaching youth soccer. He wants nothing to do with us. But 40 minutes ago, we intercepted communication suggesting a hostile nation knows his real identity and his location. This flight was selected specifically. There may be an asset aboard tasked with confirming his presence. Okoye's hands tightened on her controls. Asset, sir. As in someone who shouldn't be on that plane is on that plane, Major. And if they confirm his identity and transmit that information, his daughter becomes a target. His neighbors become targets. Everyone he's ever smiled at in a grocery store becomes leverage. So we're bringing him in, whether he wants to come or not, and we're doing it before anyone can push a button. The 737 began its descent, vectored toward an airfield that wasn't on any civilian charts. Okoye could see it now through the thinning clouds, a military installation, runways long enough for heavy bombers, hangars that could swallow a dozen fighters. Ground vehicles were already positioned along the taxiway, SUVs with tinted windows and men in tactical gear who didn't wear unit patches. Inside the cabin, panic had given way to surreal acceptance. People were filming everything, their phones capturing the fighter escort from every angle. Social media was probably exploding already. Conspiracy theories spawning faster than moderators could delete them. But the man in 8C wasn't looking at the jets anymore. He was looking at his daughter, memorizing her face with the intensity of someone who knew how quickly everything could change. She was still holding her purple crayon, still wearing her light-up sneakers. Still 6 years old and innocent in a way he'd killed to protect for 7 years. Daddy, where are we landing? He'd promised never to lie to her. It was the one rule he'd set for himself after her mother died, after the funeral where he'd worn his dress uniform one last time and felt like a fraud because the medals on his chest represented secrets he could never tell his wife's family. Somewhere safe, he said. Somewhere the people I used to work with can help us. Are you going to fly again? The question landed like a punch. He opened his mouth, closed it, then chose his words carefully. I don't know, Maggie, maybe, if I have to. The 737's landing gear deployed with a mechanical whine that he felt in his bones. Muscle memory from 10,000 flight hours tried to assess angle of descent, airspeed, crosswind correction. He forced himself to stay still, to be the civilian he'd spent 7 years becoming. But his eyes tracked the lead F-35 as it peeled off with military precision, making room for the airliner's approach. Major Okoye watched the 737 touch down, its tires smoking against concrete as thrust reversers engaged. She maintained her position overhead, a guardian angel with afterburners, while ground teams swarmed the aircraft the moment it stopped rolling. Stairs were positioned. The forward door opened. And then she saw him emerge, ordinary-looking man in a stained sweatshirt, carrying a small child who clutched a stuffed dolphin. Ground security personnel surrounded him immediately, but they weren't aggressive. They were deferential. One of them, a gray-haired man in a suit, actually saluted. The man in the sweatshirt, Falcon 0, the ghost pilot, the legend, hesitated for just a moment before returning the salute with parade ground precision, his daughter still in his arms. Admiral Hutchins stood on the tarmac as the ground team brought them over. He was 73 years old, had commanded carrier strike groups in 2 wars, and had personally authorized operations that resulted in the deaths of men far more dangerous than they looked. But watching this particular man walk toward him, he felt something he rarely experienced: uncertainty. "Commander Reeves," he said, using the rank instead of the name because old habits died hard. "Or do you prefer Mr. Reeves these days?" "Marcus is fine, sir." The voice was quiet, measured, exactly the way Hutchins remembered from briefings years ago when this man had laid out impossible mission parameters and then flown them anyway. "We need to talk." "I gathered that from the 4-ship escort. Little overkill, wasn't it?" Hutchins smiled without humor. "Walk with me. Your daughter can wait in the family lounge. There are toys, snacks, someone who's actually qualified to take care of kids unlike the rest of us war criminals." Marcus set Maggie down gently, kneeling to her level. "I need to talk with the Admiral for a few minutes. Lieutenant Morrison here is going to show you where you can watch cartoons. Can you do that?" She looked uncertain, then nodded. A young officer, female, wearing the insignia of a family services liaison, held out her hand with a warm smile. "I have fruit snacks and they just added the new Blue Eye episodes. Come on, I'll show you." As Maggie was led away, Marcus's whole demeanor changed. The tired single dad evaporated, replaced by something harder, more focused. He followed Hutchins into a secure building, through corridors that smelled of floor wax and aviation fuel, into a briefing room where 3 large monitors displayed satellite imagery and signal intercepts. 12 hours ago," Hutchins began without preamble, "NSA flagged a communication from a known intelligence operative in the Cincinnati area. The transmission was encrypted, but we got enough to know they'd identified someone called Falcon 0 living under civilian identity. They had your address, Marcus, your daughter's school, the coffee shop where you get your morning cup." Marcus's jaw went tight, but he said nothing. "The operative boarded your flight under a Canadian passport. False identity, good enough to pass TSA but not good enough for us once we knew what to look for. They were planning to visually confirm your identity and transmit confirmation to their handlers. Once that happened, my daughter becomes a bargaining chip. I know how this works, Admiral. I wrote the manual on how this works." Hutchins pulled up a photograph on the center monitor. A woman, mid-30s, dark hair, forgettable features, the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. Seat 12B, Anna Kowalski, according to her passport. Actually, a contracted intelligence officer for a foreign service we won't name in this room. She's been extracted from the aircraft and is currently enjoying hospitality. Marcus studied the photograph with professional detachment. He'd done this before, assessed threats from grainy surveillance photos, made split-second decisions about who lived and who didn't. But that was before Maggie. Before he'd promised Emily on her deathbed that he'd give their daughter a normal life, a safe life, the kind of childhood neither of them had known. "What do you need from me?" he asked quietly. Hutchins opened a folder, old-school paper, no digital trail, and slid it across the table. Inside were mission profiles, tactical assessments, photographs of military installations in regions that made Marcus's pulse quicken despite himself. 6 months ago, we lost contact with a deep-cover operative in a country I can't name. She had intelligence on a weapons development program that makes nuclear proliferation look like a science fair project. We've tried 4 extraction operations, lost 2 aircraft and 3 pilots. The airspace is locked down tighter than Moscow during the Cold War. SAM sights every 10 kilometers, radar coverage that would catch a sparrow farting. Marcus flipped through the pages, his trained eye absorbing tactical data faster than most pilots could read a menu. Threat rings overlapping in red, flight corridors that didn't exist, terrain that offered zero margin for error. "This is a suicide mission," he said flatly. "You're asking someone to fly low-level penetration through integrated air defense that would shred an F-35, extract a single person from a hostile urban environment, and egress through the same corridor. Nobody could fly this. You could fly this." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus closed the folder carefully, his hands steady despite the rage building in his chest. "I have a 6-year-old daughter, Admiral. I coach her soccer team. I make her pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. I read her bedtime stories and check for monsters under her bed. I'm not that person anymore. That person is exactly why your daughter will never be safe unless you do this one last mission. The intelligence service that made you doesn't forget, Marcus. They sent someone to confirm your identity because they're planning something that requires leverage over us. And your leverage, your skill set, your knowledge, your legend, it's all leverage. But if you do this, if you extract our operative and bring her home with intelligence intact, we can burn every record. We can give you a new identity so clean that even we won't be able to find you. You disappear. For real this time." Marcus walked to the window overlooking the flight line. 2 F-35s were taxiing toward the hangar, their pilots probably debriefing already, telling the story of the weird intercept that would become Ready Room legend by evening. He'd been that pilot once. Young, hungry, believing that the missions mattered more than anything else. "What aircraft?" he asked, still facing the window. Behind him, Hutchins allowed himself a small smile. "We acquired something special for this. Come on, I'll show you." They walked across the tarmac to a hangar set apart from the others, the kind with armed guards and biometric locks. Inside, under harsh LED lighting, sat an aircraft that made Marcus stop breathing. It wasn't an F-35. It was something else entirely, a bastard hybrid of stealth technology and raw performance that shouldn't exist according to any public military procurement. The airframe was matte black, angular in ways that bent light wrong, with control surfaces that suggested maneuverability physics shouldn't allow. "Project Wraith," Hutchins said quietly. "Sixth-generation test platform. Doesn't officially exist. Can't officially exist for another decade according to budget timelines. But it exists, and it's the only aircraft we have that might make it through that airspace." Marcus approached slowly, the way someone approaches a wild animal. His hands wanted to touch it, to feel the composite skin, to trace the thrust vectoring nozzles that could probably pull angle of attack that would black out most pilots. "Who's cleared to fly it?" "Right now, 3 test pilots, all of whom have already said no to this mission because they have more sense than we're giving them credit for." Hutchins stepped beside him. "You were always different, Marcus. The other pilots, they were good, some of them great, but you had something else. Some kind of spatial awareness, some ability to see the geometry of a fight before it happened. You flew like physics was a suggestion rather than a law. That's poetic bullshit and you know it, Admiral. I just practiced more and got lucky more. Luck doesn't fly 17 deep penetration missions without taking a scratch. Luck doesn't bring back assets from situations where rescue wasn't possible. Your last squadron commander told me you could feel the sky. Said watching you fly was like watching someone have a conversation with the air itself." Marcus turned away from the aircraft. "Pretty words won't make me abandon my daughter for a mission that's probably going to get me killed. Your daughter is why you have to do this." Hutchins's voice went hard. "Because the people who want to leverage you won't stop at confirming your identity. They'll keep pushing, keep probing until they find a crack. And when they do, Maggie becomes a tool. A way to make Falcon 0 fly for them instead of us. Is that the life you want for her?" The hangar was silent except for the hum of ventilation systems. Marcus felt the weight of it crushing down, the impossible choice between the life he'd built and the ghost he'd tried to bury. Major Okoye entered the hangar quietly, still in her flight suit, helmet under one arm. She'd been debriefed, told to stand down, and promptly ignored orders because something about this whole situation felt unfinished. She stopped when she saw the aircraft, her professional curiosity momentarily overriding protocol. "Sir, is that classified above your clearance, Major?" Hutchins said, but his tone wasn't harsh. "Since you're here, maybe you can help me convince our guest that flying is like riding a bicycle." Akoy looked between the Admiral and the man in the Notre Dame sweatshirt, pieces clicking together. "This is Falcon Zero." It wasn't a question. Marcus met her eyes, seeing the calculation there, the assessment. She was good. He could tell from the way she held herself, the efficiency of her movements. The kind of pilot who'd probably saved her wingman's life more than once through pure skill and iron nerves. "Was Falcon Zero," he corrected. "Now I'm just Marcus, single dad, air traffic controller. Boring." "Nothing boring about someone who supposedly flew into Tehran airspace and extracted 3 CIA officers during the embassy crisis," Akoy said. "That story still gets told in flight school, even if officially it never happened." Marcus smiled despite himself. "Flight school's gotten chattier since my day. They tell other stories too. About a pilot who could fly nap-of-earth through mountain valleys at night without instruments. About someone who landed a damaged F-18 on a carrier in a typhoon after getting hit by SAM fragments. About a guy who's supposedly the only pilot to ever successfully evade an S-400 missile system without countermeasures because he flew the geometry so perfectly the missiles couldn't track. She paused. "They tell those stories because pilots need heroes. We need to believe that someone out there is good enough that physics bends for them." Hutchins watched the exchange with interest. Sometimes the best recruitment pitch came from peers, not admirals. Marcus shook his head. "Those stories are exaggerated. Every mission had a team. Ground controllers, intelligence analysts, support aircraft. Nobody flies alone. But somebody has to be in the cockpit when it matters," Akoy pressed. "Somebody has to make the decision to punch through clouds at 400 knots when you can't see what's on the other side. Somebody has to feel when a missile's tracking and brake exactly the right way at exactly the right moment. That's not team support, that's skill, your skill." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "I'm good at what I do, sir. I know that. But I looked at the mission profile they want to run. I looked at the threat rings and the timeline and the extraction parameters. And I'm not good enough." Marcus studied Major Akoy with new appreciation. She had the rare quality of knowing her own limitations without false modesty, the mark of a pilot who'd survived long enough to see retirement. "Neither am I," he said honestly. "Not anymore. 7 years of rust. 7 years of civilian life making me soft. 7 years of being a father," Akoy finished. "I get it. I have a son. He's 3. When I deploy, it tears me apart every time. But I do it because I believe the job matters. Because the people we protect include him." She gestured toward the Wraith aircraft. "If you don't fly this, they'll keep trying until someone doesn't come back. More pilots, more families getting folded flags, or they'll scrub the mission entirely and leave an operative to die in a black site somewhere." "Is that better?" Marcus felt the trap closing, baited with guilt and logic in equal measure. Hutchins knew exactly what he was doing bringing her in. Peer pressure worked on fighter pilots like nothing else. "How long to prep the aircraft?" he heard himself ask and immediately wanted to take the words back. Hutchins didn't smile, but his posture relaxed slightly. 16 hours. Gives you time to review mission materials, run simulator sessions, and remember what that throttle feels like. Major Akoy will assist with tactical planning. And my daughter, protected, 24-hour security, the best we have. And after you complete this mission, you both disappear. New names, new location, financial support until she's 18. We take care of our own, Marcus, especially legends." Marcus looked at the Wraith again, its predatory lines promising speed and violence. Part of him, the part he'd tried to kill for 7 years, sang at the sight of it. The part that lived for the razor's edge between control and chaos. The part that found peace only at Mach 2 with the Earth screaming past in a blur. "I need to talk to Maggie first. She deserves to know her father isn't abandoning her." "Of course." Hutchins motioned toward the hangar door. "Take your time. The mission launch is scheduled for 0400. Plenty of time for pancakes." The attempt at humor fell flat, but Marcus appreciated it anyway. He walked back toward the main building, his mind already compartmentalizing, father versus pilot, civilian versus warrior. Akoy fell into step beside him. For what it's worth, the stories weren't exaggerated. I pulled your actual after-action reports, classified ones. The missions you flew were impossible. You made them look routine. I was younger then, faster reflexes, better eyes. Maybe, but wisdom counts for something too, experience. The ability to read a situation and know when to push and when to back off. That only comes with time. In the family lounge, Maggie was building an elaborate tower of blocks while Lieutenant Morrison watched with patient amusement. She looked up when Marcus entered, her face brightening in the way that made his chest ache every time. "Daddy, look how tall." "That's amazing, sweetheart." He sat beside her on the carpet, joints protesting in a way that reminded him he wasn't 25 anymore. "Can we talk for a minute?" Morrison took the hint and excused herself. Maggie put down her blocks, sensing the shift in tone with that eerie intuition children possessed. "Are we in trouble?" "No, but I need to go away for a little while, just a day or two." He watched her face fall and wished he could offer something better than partial truths. "The people I used to work with need my help with something important, something that could help keep lots of people safe." "Will you be in danger?" The question was too perceptive for a 6-year-old. Or maybe children always knew when their parents were lying, they just didn't always call it out. "I'll be careful, the safest I can possibly be. And while I'm gone, you'll stay here with Lieutenant Morrison and some other very nice people. They have movies and games and all the snacks you could want." "I don't want snacks, I want you to stay." Marcus pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Emily's hair had smelled the same way. The genetic lottery had given Maggie her mother's dark curls and bright laugh, gifts he was grateful for every single day. "I know, baby, I want to stay too, but sometimes grown-ups have to do things that are hard because it's the right thing. Your mom understood that, she was brave like that." Maggie was quiet for a moment, then asked in a small voice, "Is this like your pilot stories?" "Yes, like my stories." "Then you'll come back. You always came back in the stories." The simple faith in her voice nearly broke him. She didn't know the stories he'd never told, the missions where coming back was a near thing, the nights Emily had cried herself to sleep not knowing if he was alive or dead. "I'll come back," he promised, hoping desperately that it wasn't a lie. "And then we'll go home." He hesitated, thinking of Hutchins's offer of new identities, new lives. "Maybe somewhere new. Would you like that? A new house, maybe near the ocean where you could see dolphins. Real ones, not just coloring books." Her eyes lit up despite the tears threatening to spill. "With you, always with me, I promise." It was perhaps the most important promise he'd ever made. The next 12 hours blurred together in a cascade of briefings, systems reviews, and simulator sessions that made Marcus's head spin. The Wraith was unlike anything he'd flown, responsive to the point of being twitchy, with thrust-to-weight ratios that could turn a pilot into paste if they weren't careful. He ran the mission profile 6 times in simulation, failed 3 times, barely succeeded twice, and once pulled off a flawless run that left the monitoring team silent with something like awe. Major Okoye sat in on every session, offering observations that were sharp and practical. She'd clearly studied the target area extensively, had ideas about threat avoidance that Marcus integrated immediately. By the 3rd hour, they developed a shorthand communication, the kind that took most cruise months to build. "You're good at this," Marcus said during a break, both of them drinking terrible coffee in a briefing room that smelled of dry erase markers and anxiety. "Teaching, I mean. You think about tactics the right way. Had good instructors." She paused, then added carefully, "You know this is probably a one-way trip, right? Even with perfect execution, the variables are stacked against success." "I know, and you're doing it anyway." "My daughter's safety isn't a variable, it's the mission. Everything else is just details." Okoye nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that, about what happens if this goes wrong. Your daughter Maggie, she'd need someone. Someone who understands what her father was, what he sacrificed." Marcus looked at her sharply. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you're the kind of father who coaches soccer despite being qualified to fly billion-dollar aircraft. I know you kept a promise to your wife to leave the life behind. And I know you're going back into it to protect your daughter from consequences that weren't her fault." She met his eyes. "I have clearance high enough to know what happens to assets families when operations go bad. Sometimes they disappear into witness protection with strangers. Sometimes they just disappear. I'm offering to make sure that doesn't happen to Maggie if you don't come back." The offer landed with unexpected weight. Marcus hadn't considered beyond the mission itself, hadn't let himself think about failure and its aftermath. "You do that. Take responsibility for a stranger's child. My son deserves to grow up in a world where people like you exist, where pilots make impossible flights because it's right, not because it's ordered. If raising your daughter helps create that world, then yes, I do that." Marcus extended his hand. Akoi shook it, her grip firm and steady. No more words were necessary. The last hour before mission launch, Admiral Hutchins found Marcus in the ready room, already suited up in a flight suit that bore no insignia, no rank, no identification. "Second thoughts?" Hutchins asked. "About 1,000. Marcus adjusted his harness straps with muscle memory that hadn't faded despite the years. "But I'm going anyway. Good man." Hutchins held out a small object, a patch worn and faded, showing a Falcon in dive position with the number 0 beneath it. "Thought you might want this." Marcus stared at the patch he'd left in his locker 7 years ago, the last tangible piece of his old identity. "How did you? We keep better track of legends than you'd like to believe." Hutchins's expression softened slightly. "You're not just doing this for Maggie, Marcus. You're doing it because flying is who you are. It's in your blood the same way salt is in seawater. You can pretend to be a civilian. You can coach soccer and make pancakes. But when you're in that cockpit, you're going to feel alive in a way you haven't felt in 7 years. Marcus wanted to deny it, to claim the Admiral was wrong, but the words stuck in his throat, because it was true. Standing here in a flight suit about to strap into an aircraft designed to kill or be killed, he felt something stirring that had been dormant for too long. Purpose. Direction. The clean simplicity of a mission with clear objectives. "That doesn't make me a good father," he said quietly. "It makes you human." Good fathers teach their children that sometimes you have to stand up when it's hard, that protecting others matters more than comfort. Maggie will understand that someday. Hutchins stepped back, coming to attention, and saluted with parade ground precision. "Clear skis and tailwinds, Falcon 0. Marcus returned the salute, then walked toward the Wraith waiting on the darkened flight line. The ground crew had it prepped, fuel topped off, weapons systems armed with munitions that officially didn't exist. Major Akoi was there, clipboard in hand, performing final checks with the methodical precision of someone who understood that details saved lives. "All systems green," she reported. "Weather's clear over the target area. Satellite coverage has a 3-minute gap starting at 0418, which gives you a narrow window for the actual extraction. After that, you're flying through coverage and operational security goes to hell." Comforting. "I don't do comforting, I do accurate." She held his eyes. "Bring her home, sir, the operative. And yourself. Maggie's waiting." Marcus climbed the ladder, settled into the cockpit that smelled of new electronics and possibility. The canopy lowered with a hydraulic hiss, sealing him in. His hands found controls with instinctive familiarity, pre-flight checks flowing through his fingers faster than conscious thought. The Wraith's engines ignited with a whisper rather than a roar, stealth extended even to sound signature. Tower clearance came through encrypted channel. Marcus advanced throttles, felt the aircraft surge forward with barely restrained power. The runway lights streaked past, faster and faster, until the moment of rotation when the Earth fell away and he was airborne, climbing into darkness that was both terrifying and deeply familiar. Below, Major Akoi watched the Wraith disappear against the night sky, its stealth profile making it invisible within seconds. She thought about her son at home, about Maggie in the family lounge, about all the children who'd never know their parents had flown into darkness to keep them safe. Admiral Hutchins stood beside her, binoculars trained on nothing now. "Think he'll make it?" she asked. "I think he's Falcon 0. If anyone can fly this, he can." The Wraith knifed through the stratosphere at speeds that turned geography into abstraction. Marcus settled into the rhythm of it, the constant micro-adjustments needed to keep stealth aircraft stable, the mental processing of threat data streaming across his helmet display. His route took him over open ocean, skirting air defense identification zones, threading between radar coverage gaps that existed only in theory. 2 hours into the flight, his first major threat appeared, an airborne early warning aircraft, its radar powerful enough to potentially burn through stealth at close range. Marcus descended, dropping to wave-top height where radar clutter from sea returns would mask his signature. The Wraith handled it beautifully, stable despite turbulence that would have rattled older airframes. He flew 50 feet above rolling ocean, trusting instruments and instinct in equal measure. The early warning aircraft passed overhead, oblivious. Marcus climbed back to altitude, checked his timeline. Still on schedule, still alone in the dark. The target country's coastline appeared as a dim line against infrared display. This was the commitment point. Once he crossed that border, there was no turning back. Air defenses would be active, integrated, lethal. Any mistake would result in death measured in milliseconds. Marcus thought about Maggie's gap-toothed smile, about Emily's voice on their wedding day, about all the reasons he'd walked away from this life. Then he pushed the throttle forward and crossed into hostile territory at Mach 1.8, becoming a ghost hunting ghosts. The SAM sights lit up his threat display like Christmas lights, overlapping coverage that should have been impenetrable. But Marcus had always seen patterns others missed, gaps that existed in geometry rather than technology. He flew the spaces between, too low for some systems, too fast for others, his angle and altitude constantly shifting in three-dimensional chess. The target city materialized through haze. 6 million people, most of them asleep, unaware that foreign aircraft was violating their sovereignty at speeds that turned seconds into miles. Marcus reduced throttle, trading speed for stealth, his approach angle carefully calculated to minimize time exposed to urban radar installations. The extraction point was a rooftop in the diplomatic quarter, marked by IR strobe visible only through his helmet optics. He could see the operative now, a small figure waiting beside an access door, probably terrified and hopeful in equal measure. The Wraith wasn't designed for hover capability, but it had thrust vectoring that could manage brief stationary positioning. Marcus brought the aircraft to near stop 50 feet above the rooftop, fighting turbulence from his own jet wash, every instinct screaming that this violated every principle of tactical aviation. The operative ran forward, carrying a pack that presumably contained intelligence worth dying for. A rope ladder deployed from the Wraith's belly, crude technology on an advanced platform but effective. The operative climbed with desperate speed while Marcus fought to hold position, watching his threat display light up as radar installations triangulated on his stationary signature. 20 seconds. 30. Come on, he muttered, feeling Sam's sights achieve lock. 40 seconds. The operative reached the modified weapons bay, scrambled inside, hit the close button. The bay doors sealed. Marcus didn't wait for confirmation. He pitched the nose down and lit afterburners, accelerating away from the rooftop in a climbing spiral that pushed G-forces into the red. Missiles launched from 3 different sites, their exhaust trails visible as bright lines against darkness. Marcus's hands moved across controls with the precision of a concert pianist, the Wraith responding to inputs that should have been impossible. He broke left, then right, then inverted and pulled -G while launching countermeasures in a pattern that created false targets. The missiles tracked the flares instead of the aircraft, detonating in sequence like fireworks celebrating his escape. But the celebration was premature. More sites were activating, tracking data being shared across the integrated air defense network. Marcus was no longer a ghost. He was the most wanted target in 3,000 miles of airspace. He descended again, this time threading through a mountain valley at speeds that left zero margin for error. Rock walls blurred past on either side, close enough to touch if the canopy were open. His helmet display showed the route ahead, but he was flying feel as much as instruments, sensing when to bank and when to climb by instinct developed over 10,000 hours. A fighter launched from an airbase 60 miles north, one of their advanced interceptors, Russian-built, flown by a pilot who was probably very good and definitely very motivated. Marcus watched the hostile aircraft's track, calculated intercept geometry, and made a decision that Admiral Hutchins would have called insane. Instead of running, he turned toward the threat. The Wraith accelerated through Mach 2, closing distance at a combined speed that would bring them nose to nose in under 2 minutes. The hostile pilot probably thought Marcus was going to engage in a dogfight, was preparing weapons and tactics for air-to-air combat. But Marcus had no intention of fighting. At the last possible moment, he dropped to the valley floor and went completely dark, engines to idle. All electronic emissions ceased. The Wraith became a glider, a silent ghost dropping through air while the hostile fighter screamed overhead at full military power, its radar searching for a target that had simply vanished. Marcus counted to 10, then relit engines and reversed course, now behind the fighter that had been hunting him. The hostile pilot would be confused, checking instruments, reporting contact lost to ground controllers who would be equally baffled. By the time they reorganized the search, Marcus would be 50 miles away. He crossed back into international airspace 19 minutes later, the Wraith's fuel state dangerously low but sufficient. Tanker aircraft waited at designated coordinates, a KC-135 that probably had no idea what it was refueling but followed orders anyway. The connection was smooth, fuel flowing, Marcus's hands steady despite exhaustion creeping through his body. Major Okoy's voice came through on encrypted channel, the first human contact since mission start. Falcon 0, we have your transponder. Welcome back. Status: mission successful. Package secured. Aircraft systems nominal. Fuel state improving. A pause, then Okoy's voice came back softer. Outstanding work, sir. Your daughter is awake and asking about you. She wants to know if you saw any dolphins. Marcus smiled inside his helmet, feeling tension drain away. Tell her I saw something better. Tell her I saw the sunrise from 60,000 feet, and it was the most beautiful thing in the world. The Wraith crossed back into friendly airspace as dawn broke behind him, painting the sky in colors that no photograph could capture. Marcus descended toward the same base he'd left hours ago, the aircraft handling perfectly despite everything it had been through. He greased the landing, rolled to parking, and shut down systems with hands that finally started to shake. The canopy opened. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft. Admiral Hutchins was there, along with Major Okoy and a medical team ready to check the operative who climbed out of the weapons bay looking stunned and grateful. But Marcus only had eyes for the small figure running across the tarmac, Lieutenant Morrison struggling to keep up. He climbed down the ladder faster than safety protocols recommended and caught Maggie as she launched herself at him, her arms wrapping around his neck with fierce strength. You came back. I promised, didn't I? He held her tight, breathing in strawberry shampoo and feeling more complete than he had in 7 years. Did you see dolphins? Better than dolphins. I saw the whole world from up in the sky, and all I could think about was getting back to you. Admiral Hutchins approached respectfully, giving them a moment before clearing his throat. We have a plane waiting. Private charter, no questions asked. It'll take you to your new home, coastal California, nice area, good schools. Everything you need will be waiting. New identities in the works, clean break. Marcus looked at him, then at Major Okoy standing beside the Wraith with an expression he couldn't quite read. What happens to the operative? Debriefing, then witness protection. The intelligence she carried is already changing strategic calculations at levels above my pay grade. You made a difference tonight, Marcus. A big one. I just flew a plane. You flew an impossible mission. There's a difference. Hutchins extended his hand. Thank you for your service, both times. Marcus shook it, feeling the weight of finality. This really was the end. No more call signs, no more midnight launches, no more dancing with physics at the edge of what humans could survive. Just a future with Maggie, watching her grow up, being present for every soccer game and science fair and late-night conversation about life's big questions. As he walked toward the waiting charter plane, Maggie's hand in his, Marcus looked back one last time at the Wraith. The aircraft sat silent and predatory on the ramp, already being prepared for return to wherever test platforms disappeared to when their missions ended. Major Okoy stood beside it, and she raised her hand in salute. Not to his rank. He didn't have one anymore. Not to protocol. This was beyond protocol. She was saluting the pilot, the legend, The man who'd proven one last time that impossible was just a word people used before someone like Falcon Zero showed them different. 3 months later, Marcus stood on a California beach watching Maggie chase waves, her new friends from school laughing as they built sandcastles. The Pacific was gray and magnificent, smelling of salt and possibility. He'd taken a job as a flight instructor at a local airport, civilian operations only, teaching teenagers how to handle a Cessna 172. It was simple work, honest work, work that let him sleep at night. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thought you should know. The intelligence your operative brought back prevented something catastrophic. 3 hostile nation-states involved, weapons that would have changed everything. You saved more lives than you'll ever know. Oh, he didn't need to ask who O was. Major Okoye kept her promises. Another text followed seconds later, this one an image. A photograph of a patch. The same Falcon and Zero design he'd carried on his last mission. But beneath it, new text had been added. Some fly, some soar, one was Falcon Zero. The message accompanying it was simple. They're telling your story in flight schools now, the right way, not as legend but as a reminder that the best pilots know when to fly and when to come home. Marcus saved the image, then deleted the texts. He looked at Maggie, who was showing another child how to properly pack sand to make castle walls structurally sound. His daughter, so much like Emily, so much herself. "Daddy," she called, "come help us. We're making a castle." He walked toward her, leaving his phone on the blanket. The sun broke through clouds, casting light across the beach in the way it sometimes did on California afternoons, and for a moment Marcus could almost believe he really was just another parent watching their kid play. Almost. But the sky called to him still in quiet moments. The geometry of clouds, the way wind patterns suggested updrafts and downdrafts. The instinctive calculation of approach angles and escape vectors. He'd always be a pilot. That would never change. The difference now was that he got to be Maggie's father too. And that, Marcus reflected as he knelt beside her castle and was immediately assigned to tower construction duty, was the most important mission he'd ever fly. The Wraith, wherever it was stored, would fly again someday with another pilot, another mission. But Falcon Zero had flown his last sortie. That legend belonged to history now. The man who'd worn the call sign belonged to a 6-year-old girl who needed him alive more than the world needed him airborne. And for the first time in his life, Marcus was absolutely certain he'd made the right choice.